Next from Springfield, Governor Rauner meets with his cabinet at the end of the legislative session and expresses disappointment over the legislature's passed budget, which the governor believes to be irresponsible and does not address the difficult financial realities facing the state. This runs about 20 minutes.
All right, great. Trey has been keeping me informed on all the great work you guys are doing, and I want to say bless you, thank you for the leadership that you've shown here leading our departments in our administration. You guys have done a terrific job. Obviously, you know we've got major challenges ahead. I know all of you are working with Trey as we think about how to do our administration of the government more efficiently, more effectively, on a more accountable basis. And you have been for months working on a comprehensive transformation, a new way to think about the structure of our government and the operations of our government. I know that's been going on for a while. I know you've been making good progress, and I'm eager here to sit with you and learn a little bit more in detail about that progress today. One of the primary reasons I wanted to come today was also to report into you a bit. Because we have very difficult jobs, challenges ahead. We've known that. We've discussed that all together in the past. And now it looks like our jobs are about to become even harder with an even greater sense of urgency. I'm sorry for that. I wish it weren't true, but it looks like there is not sincere interest within the legislature to support significant reforms of the structure of our government and the economic competitiveness of the Illinois economy. And without significant reforms, and in the context of a fundamentally unbalanced budget, frankly an unconstitutional budget, which is what the legislature has passed this spring, we are going to be facing very serious operating and cash flow challenges. And so Trey and I and our senior team has been discussing the actions we need to take together to prepare for the very real possibility that we do not have a budget, that we do not have the normal operating flow of capital that we're used to inside state government. We announced some of the preliminary steps in preparation and contingency planning that's needed yesterday, and that's just the first step. We'll be asking each one of you to review in detail your operations, your departments, and get ready for the very real possibility that we are facing cash crisis and a major restructuring of the government. Now, I'm very disappointed to bring you that news. We've worked hard for months and months to try to negotiate in good faith with the General Assembly a balanced budget, a truly balanced budget, and I'm still, I got to tell you, I'm stunned. And I'm very disappointed that the General Assembly did this year what they did last year. I still can't quite grasp. They did the same thing. An unconstitutional, unbalanced budget, and then they left May 31st. So that puts us in a bind. There's been as discussion, as you know, there's some folks who said, we shouldn't talk about reforms, we should only talk about budget. Well, let's be crystal clear. Reforms are at the core of the budget. Reforms are what the budget should reflect. If we're not growing our economy, if we're not competitive and growing, we won't be funding our budget. And we will constantly have budgets year in, year out that are out of balance, as we've had for a long time. And unfortunately, as you all know, we have not been growing our economy. We've been pretty flatlined. We've lost 300,000 manufacturing jobs the last 15 years out of Illinois. We've lost 97,000 union jobs out of Illinois the last 10 years. Jim Schultz is well aware. He and I are battling right now. There are many companies thinking about leaving. Now, the good news is some are considering coming, and we're working them hard. But you know what? When they see the financial instability and lack of financial responsibility and lack of financial discipline that our government has shown so far this spring, it's hard if you're going to make hundreds of millions of dollars in new investment. It's hard to think about coming to Illinois. Now, we're going to stay as persuasive and aggressive as we can, but we are at a disadvantage with the types of budget and the irresponsible financial management that the legislature is imposing on us. And when they say, well, regulatory reform, workers' comp reform, tort reform, that's not the budget. Let's be clear, it absolutely is about the budget, because those regulatory reforms allow us to grow our economy that increases our tax base and increases our tax revenue to fund the budget. Same thing with term limits, same thing with fair maps and redistricting reform. It gets folks into office who are public servants there to do the right thing, making some tough decisions for the long term, not just re-election. That's the critical thing. It puts folks who are into office who aren't just locked in as incumbents, able to just work only for special interests. It makes them more accountable to the voters. We don't have that enough in Illinois. And Speaker Madigan and President Cullerton, with all due respect, they have structured a power system where they control the many members of the General Assembly. They're locked in doing the Speaker's bidding, and they're not really representing their districts. They're representing the political class that Speaker Madigan gets his funding from. That's a fact. It sounds a little harsh, but that's a fact. And we've got to change that. We need to make Illinois government responsible to the voters and the taxpayers. That's what can result in balanced budgets and financial stability in every year going forward. Now, I think many of you realize that the property taxes are our #1 tax burden. And some folks have said to me, well, Bruce, don't talk about property taxes, because let's just talk about state taxes, and let's raise state taxes. And I say, ladies and gentlemen, we cannot just talk about raising taxes at the state level. Property taxes are our #1 tax problem. They are #1 tax that's uncompetitive. We in New Jersey basically have the highest property taxes in America. And the property taxes are the #1 tax burden that I hear businesses complain about when they talk about their frustration with Illinois and why they leave Illinois. And again, we need to take on property taxes so we're economically competitive, but we also need to take on property taxes because if we ever are to go talk with our homeowners and our hardworking families and our small business owners about tax reform that may include some new revenues, if we ever are to talk about that, and I'm open to it, but if we are to talk about it, we first must have reduced their property tax burden and allow them to get local control of their property tax burden so they're in a financial position to be able to talk about other sorts of revenues and other taxes. They're all interconnected. And we have taken the vast bulk of our recommendations to turn the state around. We've taken those off the table. As in a spirit of compromise, we've taken many things off the table. You all know we have a very comprehensive plan to turn the state around, but we're going to do that over 4 years, not in the first 6 months. We've taken most of those things off the table for now. We haven't given up on a single one, not a single one for the long term, but for today, in the spirit of compromise and negotiation to get a budget done, we've taken most off the table and we focused down on 5 things: workers' comp, tort reform, getting a handle of local control on property taxes, term limits on all elected officials. I think everybody's still stunned that Evelyn and I have recommended term limits on ourselves. I don't think they can quite believe it, but we have. It's a privilege to work for people in Illinois, and 8 years is a long time, and that's plenty of time. We should let new leaders emerge after that. And we're also recommending a fair maps, redistricting reform, and this is bipartisan. We've got Democrats and Republicans supporting this initiative. What's clear, I'm cautiously optimistic because many of the members in the General Assembly in both parties are supportive of, they know we need reforms, and they're supportive of reforms. But many of them, especially in the Democratic caucus today, are very wary about voting for him because they don't want to anger the Speaker. And, you know, he controls the spigot on campaign cash. He controls the money from the special interests that fund government, and they don't want to anger him. So they're a little reluctant to vote. But you know what? They know it's the right thing to do, and I'm cautiously optimistic that we can make the case and persuade them that now's the time for reform. We can't kick the can down the road anymore. Now, I am disappointed that the city of Chicago chose a pension bill that does kick the can down the road there for police and fire. They just changed the ramp. We've seen this movie before. We've seen this for decades. Every time there's a meaningful pension payment, it's, well, let's lower it and move it and stretch it out longer. We've been doing this in Illinois for decades. We need structural reform of the pensions. I got to tell you, I'm frustrated and disappointed. I was hoping we could do comprehensive pension reform very quickly after the Supreme Court ruled, I was hoping with the General Assembly, and I had tried to get them to negotiate a pension alternative so we'd be ready to move quickly when the Supreme Court ruled, because many of us thought that it was very unlikely the Supreme Court would approve that pension change that they made for a couple years ago. I personally was against the change because I do not think it's right. Even if the pension deal was cut in a conflict of interest or was overly generous or had, had some issues with how it was arrived at, a pension deal was a pension deal, and a retiree's benefits should not get cut after they're retired, period, end of story. I believe that just from a contract as well as a moral point of view. They reduced benefits in their bill, and I didn't think that was fair. I was never supportive of that. It wasn't a surprise when the Supreme Court threw that out. We did learn in the language, if you study it, there is a possibility, is a little more likely that even our recommendations on a pension reform are unconstitutional. It's a little more likely that we're unconstitutional, not 100%, but it looks like realistically that could be the case. But we have learned from that, and we've met with President Cullerton. He was unwilling to meet with us prior on pensions prior to the Supreme Court ruling. We should have met prior, because we could have said, if this happens, we'll do this. If that happens, we'll do that. I guess that's not how government works. I'm amazed now. Pensions are our number one financial crisis holding us, and they have not been willing to talk about a new pension bill. So we're going to change that in the next couple of weeks. But we have to stay focused and we can't give up on this. We've got to stay strong. Reform before any other talks about revenue or talking about anything else. We need reform. Now, this puts us all in a bind, because the reality is we don't have a budget today, a constitutional balanced budget, and we have a team in the General Assembly who so far is completely unwilling to compromise. I've not seen them compromise on a single thing at this point. We've taken so many things off the table, and all they keep saying is, we just want to have the unbalanced budget and raise taxes. That's their only subject. That's all they'll talk about. Now, I've been told this morning that the Speaker plans to introduce a new workers' comp bill tomorrow. Our team has very quickly, to try to be responsive, reviewed it, and I'm sad to say that based upon review, it's not real reform. It's more of the same. It's more of a phony reform, more of insignificant reform, and again, we've seen this movie before. I think there's an attempt to try to say, hey, it's good faith compromise. It's nowhere near. It's really, in fact, some parts of it actually take away and cost businesses more money. So it makes us less competitive. So we're not in a place right now. I wish I could sit here and tell you we'll get there for sure. I can't say that. And so that means that puts a pressure on all of you, and I apologize. But we're going to have to go into serious, significant contingency planning now. We've been doing this, obviously, for days. We made a public announcement of some of our contingency plans yesterday. We'll be rolling those announcements out going forward. But we've got to prepare to run the government as best we can with the resources we have. Make sure we take care of the most vulnerable, protect the most vulnerable, run the government with the priorities covered, and do the best we can in the circumstances. That's going to require creativity on your part. It's going to make greater challenges for all of you. I apologize for that. Thank you. You are all here, and I'm incredibly proud of every one of you in this room, because you are dedicated public servants. You're here for the right reasons, and you just care about delivering real results for the families of Illinois. That's why you're in this room. And I'm here to say God bless you. Thank you. I'm sorry your jobs are about to get a lot harder, but we'll get through this. You know, the people of Illinois deserve us to get through this, and we will. And I'm going to stay optimistic and strong. We'll keep negotiating. I had a good meeting this morning with Mayor Rahm Emanuel discussing how the issues of the city and what the state can do to create a structure and an environment for the city to get its way out of its own problems. And I look forward to meeting with the leaders tomorrow and the next day, hopefully, and just having an ongoing dialogue. This is going to take constant communication. I think you guys know this. Many of you would remember. Governor Edgar, when he first came into office, his first budget and his first summer in 1991, the Speaker didn't speak to him for the first 4 months. Now, so I'm ahead of that pace. So I'm cautiously optimistic in that regard. But they didn't get a budget until the third week of July. Okay, we're June 3rd, I think. So, we'll stay optimistic and keep pushing. Now, Governor Edgar was pushing reform as part of his budgets, and he was pushing a property tax cap at the time. The Speaker doesn't like limitations on property taxes for various reasons, and they fought about it for a long time. They worked out a compromise in the end. I'm cautiously optimistic that we can work things out in a compromise. I hope it's soon. I hope it's tomorrow. The reality is it could be a little while, and we have a duty and moral obligation to manage the government with the resources we have and no budget, because we don't have a budget today. And we can't support an unconstitutional, unbalanced budget, and we can't force a tax hike on the people of Illinois in the current circumstance. Just can't let that happen. So, thank you for your dedication and your hard work. I'm all in for you. You guys know I've said this to each of you and in the past, and I'm here for you. My job is to help you do your jobs the best you can possibly do it. I wish I could deliver more resources for you. But you know what? The people of Illinois deserve reform in the fundamental direction of the state, first and foremost. If all we do is constantly raise taxes, we will never turn our state around. We need structural reform, and we've got to demand that. We've got to insist on that now. And with that reform can come more revenues, because we'll be a growing state, and we'll have rising family incomes, and we'll be competitive. And then that will allow us the resources to be compassionate, that we all want to do. I, as much as anybody in the state, wants to support our most vulnerable. But we've got to turn our state around, and now's the time to stand firm and stand strong on this principle. So thank you for being part of our team. I am humbled by your service. I'm humbled to work for you. I look forward to Trey and I working closely with you to help you get through this as effectively as you can, to make sure your teams are supported in every way that we possibly can support you, and look forward to great discussions going forward. So thank you very much. Bless you. I'll turn it back over to Trey.